Welcome to episode number 21 of the Men and Community Podcast. On this week's episode, we discuss what it truly means to work towards a goal. Carlo shares why you might not have the motivation you think you should. Matt explains the concept of experiencing wonder, and together we share why it's so important to feel your goals. Thank you for being part of our community. Well, everybody, we made it. We are now at episode 21 of the Men and Community Podcast. I'm Carlo. This is Matt. Thank you for joining us. If you have been with us for all 21 episodes, you have some staying power. Congratulations. Most people would be bored and gone by now.
And we're really, really grateful too. It's something that we really enjoy, and it makes us even more thrilled about it to know that you've been listening, and hopefully it's not because we've been bribing you or anything like that.
You feel some sort of strange, familiar friendship obligation.
Yeah.
You know, like we can't see who's listening. We just know that you are listening. So, we're super happy. This was a goal of mine for sure, and yours too. And for us to hit this point, we're super excited. So we have a great episode, hopefully here for you guys. We say it's going to be great. We don't know. We haven't recorded it yet, but we'll find out. So let's get started with our cards. I will go first. Yes. Hello. Hello, beautiful doggo. What book do you wish you'd written?
It's going to be a bit of a hot take, and I don't know how I'm going to justify or defend it, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is the Bible.
Okay.
Because it's the most famous book ever written. Sure. And if I'm going to write something, I want it to be on the all-time bestseller list. And I don't know who determines the bestseller list, but surely if the Bible was eligible, it should be an all-time bestseller in terms of number of books produced.
I'm under the impression it is the most widely publicized, translated, and sold book ever in the world.
I would think so.
Yeah.
But now I'm wondering about some of those other really significant religious texts like the Quran and things like that. I don't know. I really don't. Anyway, the Bible was the first one that popped to mind for me, purely because of the number of readers and just the pure impact that book has had, good and bad, throughout history.
Sure. I don't know that I have an actual legitimate serious answer to this. Part of me, all I can think about is Back to the Future, number 2, where he finds the Farmer's Almanac that tells him all the winning sports teams, and he goes back in time and I want to write that, but that means I still would have written it after it happened.
Had written.
Yeah. So it wouldn't have worked anyways. I don't have an answer for this.
Okay.
I don't know. I enjoy books. I don't write them, I guess.
I have a friend who keeps telling me that I need to write a book, and at least once, I don't see him very often, but at least once per time I see him, he says, "So, when are you writing that book?" Well, that would make a great book. It just so happens he's also a coach for authors. So, this is top of mind for him. Nevertheless. All right. Next card. What is the most extravagant thing you've ever purchased for yourself?
Ooh. Extravagant, I feel, can have a lot of different meanings to it. I would probably say my car, because I grew up dreaming of owning this car, and the day that I got to drive it off the lot was probably one of my my most proud, most exciting moments. It was, besides my house, also the largest financial purchase I've ever made. So yeah, I guess my car.
I think for me, the most extravagant thing that I've ever purchased would be hotel stays.
Sure.
We've talked that both of us love traveling. I've gotten to travel some beautiful places and certainly invested some good money to stay at some really nice places. Not consistently throughout the trip, but certainly if we're like we did in Costa Rica, staying in different types of destinations and more rural places. I like to usually bookend the trips with a nice hotel stay at the front or the back. So it's just one night here, one night there. But some of those hotels I'm thinking of, a Hilton I stayed at in Lima, Peru, and a really beautiful hotel in San Juan, Costa Rica, and or San Jose, pardon me, and some of these other places. So yeah, I think that's what would be extravagant by my definition.
Sure. And I feel like for the most part, people, and I'm, at least I feel in our generation, unless you were raised in money or, have some sort of amazing job that gives you a whole bunch of money, extravagance doesn't necessarily have to mean expensive. Extravagance can be anything that makes you feel, for lack of a better term, like bougie, right? So like, I have a couple nice watches. I love suits. Things like that. So I think you can have a lot of joy and, that kind of puffed up feeling from things that don't have to be a massive monetary investment.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is super cool. All right. So we're going to get into our episode, like I said, episode number 21. And we've kind of developed a theme over the last few episodes. We've had, I say that, but we had our Barbie movie one, and episode 20, which we're going to be recording after this one, is going to be really great.
Speaking of Back to the Future.
Back to the Future. But the theme and a lot of the conversations that we've had in this series of episodes has been around work. It's been around the value that we find. It's been around, this ever-present chase of trying to better ourselves and to find the things that truly drive us and balancing that within our lives on a day-to-day basis. And I was scrolling through TikTok, as I very often do, and I came across this video from a channel called, oh dear, the Mirror Self. And it's this whole series of videos that he does, having a conversation with an empty chair. And this video I thought was so well timed because we had been talking about all of these things. And this one particular video, it really spurred on a lot of thought in my brain. And we're not going to, I'll post the video in the Discord. You guys can go find it and watch it. I recommend that you view this guys' content. But it brought up a lot of really great questions. And the one that harked back to a lot of the things that we had talked about was the idea of, are you working to live or are you living to work? And when you hit those moments in your life where it kind of just feels like you're spinning your wheels, what does that really mean for you? And that can be a struggle for a lot of people. I know personally, I've kind of hit this rut over the last month and maybe a couple months of just feeling like, I'm spinning my wheels and I'm kind of just moving through the same old. And the video goes on to talk about a lot of different things. But one of the big ones for him is that the reason you feel like you constantly have to work towards these goals and these ambitions is because you feel like they will provide you with a better life and they feel like they'll provide you with something that you want. But you struggle to truly strive for these things, like aggressively. Like, have you ever seen somebody with a goal that they will aggressively pursue that? Doesn't matter. Nobody will stand in their way. They'll do everything they can to do that, work long hours, make up sacrifices, all sorts of things to get there. There's a difference between that kind of person and a person who lives almost in a sense of comfort. And I'm not necessarily saying that you're not improving as time goes by, but you're not doing it as aggressively as this other person.
So what I'm hearing you talk about is just in unrealistic goal setting.
It's not even unrealistic goal setting. It's that the drive that you feel you should have isn't there, and you feel guilty for it not being there.
Right. But if the idea is that we have these aspirational milestones or goalposts or things like that we're looking to hit, and we're living our life in service of some of these ambitions, surely on some level that and maybe what you're saying is that is not the way we should make our goals, but I think that when people struggle with that, they're maybe seeing these ambitions as a goal rather than using other goals as a means to pursue your further ambition.
I think you're grazing it, but really what I think it is that sometimes the goals we set for ourselves are not truly our own goals.
Okay.
And because of that, we're not pursuing them with the fervor that we would be if these were truly deep core goals of our own. So that kind of brings us to the question of like, are your goals actually your own? Right? When you're striving for something, you know, a big example of that is if you were to ask somebody, hey, would you like a massive house? Most people will say something along the lines of, well, you know, nothing too big, but I would love, you know, this house that we might see like up on Crescent Hill here in Calgary, right? This beautiful home with all the nice finishings, and it's probably 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. And it's just stunning. If you ask most people, they'll say, yeah, I would want that. But how would you know that you truly want that if you've never lived in a house like that? You've never cleaned a house like that. You've never had to pay the upkeep of a house like that. It's not a dream that is really our own. It's almost a dream that has been painted to us by society that is something that we maybe would want. So as we work these day-to-days and we strive to make more money or climb the career ladder or whatever it is, we think that we want this goal in life of a big house or a fast car or whatever it may be is. But then we struggle with this idea that you go, I feel I want this, but I'm not working as hard for it as I know I need to get me there.
And how do you think that came about? I'm thinking about this, and it's true. There's certainly, at least in a Western context, there is certainly some very well established ideals around you will be successful if you will be able to demonstrate that you've been successful when
you've really made it win.
Right, you've made it, absolutely. And it's, you know, the big house, the fast car, it's the 2.75 children, and a motorhome or a yacht or whatever it is, you know, and like, I just wonder how these things came to be. Like, is this just, to me, it just feels like these are such colonized standards of the person with the most stuff wins, you know? And like, it's just such an interesting thing that we talk about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the video, and again, totally recommend you watch it as well. The video is really interesting because it basically suggests that, yeah, how do you in fact know that you want a thing if you haven't ever experienced doing it? And I think travel was one of the things that was recommended in that video or talked about kind of as an example. Well, it's true. How many people live their life trying to save up money so that they can retire and travel the world? Well, hell, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be traveling the world when I can barely travel from my living room up to the second floor. Like, my knees are not going to be able to sustain the type of adventuring that my brain wants to, you know? And so some of these like classic things of either, because now I think we're starting to talk about two different things, either my ideal for success is something that someone else has attributed for me, the big house, the fast car, or I must work until I've earned this experience that I don't even know if I want to have this experience. This is just something that someone's telling me I should have.
Yeah, and that's basically it, is that we feel like we're almost stuck in this rat race of chasing a goal, and then when we have a hard time keeping ourselves motivated for that goal and then beat ourselves up for, you know, going home and sitting in front of the TV or playing video games or, you know, doing the things that we find joy, and we beat ourselves up over these things. We're going, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be chasing this goal with this veracity. Why am I not? It's because it's not your goal. It's because society has painted this picture for you. And to answer my belief, to answer your question, is that, media has painted that picture for us. Even if you go back and you watch movies from the 90s, right? It was even these like family movies, those families never lived in small houses. Right?
Because they were gigantic families. It was like Cheaper by the Dozen.
Cheaper by the Dozen is a great example. Yeah. Explain to me, by even in the 90s standards, how someone with that many children lived in a house of that size and afforded it.
Yeah.
There was no way.
Yeah.
There was no way, let alone now. But that was the picture that was painted, because the movie wasn't about this family having financial trouble. The movie was about all the fun little things that the siblings fought over. Right? So you can't talk about the reality of owning that large house and having that many children. So that's what every movie was about. You look like things like Fast and the Furious. Where did these teenagers get money to build cars with hundreds of thousands of dollars? They didn't.
It's good that that's where we draw the line of the things that are unrealistic about Fast and the Furious.
Well, yes. Well, but I'm talking about like the first one.
Good. Okay. Before they started like driving cars into space.
Into space, yes, for sure. I haven't actually seen much of the new ones.
Neither have I.
But like society has painted this picture for us of what success is supposed to be. And it's attached it to the feel good of a lot of different things in our media. So we feel like that's what we want to chase, right? So this kind of brings us to the next idea of the video, is that instead of beating yourself up for wanting to watch Netflix and not driving for this goal that you think you should be, it's about taking the time to try and realize what it is that the actual goals are for you. And there's no way that you can discover those goals without giving yourself the opportunity to feel them. We are human beings. We are very much emotional creatures. We attach a lot of our drive and a lot of our aspirations to the feeling of things, right? Because we're also creatures of habit, I would say that we do a lot of the same stuff over and over again because it makes us feel good. Well, how can you put in all of this front-end loaded work to strive for something if you've never felt what that thing gives you, right? I think it's why so many people struggle with things like fitness. If you've never been fit, you have a hard time working really hard to get there, right? It's the wish of. But if you see people that had, some really great success in high school playing sports and were, more trim as younger people, and then they gain weight in their adult lives, they have something to fight for a little bit harder. Right? So I guess a question that I would pose to you is, do you think that it would be easier or harder for somebody to chase a goal that they had before in the past, chase something they had in the past prior?
This is an interesting paradox to me because, surely human history is a case study of somebody had to envision or imagine or desire an outcome and then drive hard enough to be able to do it. And I appreciate what you're saying about how could we possibly, and obviously there's unicorns in the sense there's people who throughout history have been uniquely driven
to
pursue certain outcomes and achieve certain incredible things. And that's very, very true. Having said that, though, I think it's an interesting paradox that we have to kind of experience something and almost test drive our goals. And it's tricky because how do we know that we want to actually do something without, I know what you want, how do we know that we actually are going to do or achieve something without, this previous desire for it? I don't know. I'm stuck in this loop, I guess, of knowing whether or not that's going to be a thing. And this is an interesting one to process for me for that reason, I guess.
So this is kind of the way I think about it. When we develop a goal for ourselves, we generally want that thing because of the way we think it's going to make us feel, right? So if we go back to the idea of owning the house, the idea of owning the house, we want it because we think that, hey, we can show off to the neighbors or some of our high school friends or whatever, and look at this big house I live in. It makes me feel accomplished. I want the big house because, look at all the room for activities I have. I can finally pursue all of the hobbies or the decorating style that I wanted, or, I can live in the neighborhood that I've always wanted because, it gives me this feeling of completeness in my life, right? We chase these goals because we think it's going to make us feel a specific way, right? I don't think anybody wants a really large house so that they can clean. I don't think anybody wants a really large house so that they can have it be completely empty, right? Nobody buys a house just to say, I own the house. They buy it because they want to live in it. It gives a picture of the life that they want to have. So the argument that I'm kind of making here, and I guess the video is trying to make, is that there's no way for you to truly be motivated unless you can feel it.
So I think the really key paradox here that I struggle with this concept is, this idea that there's so many goals that we push towards that we have no way of really test driving, like whether it be, we talk about the big house or the fancy car. For a lot of people, it might just be a house or a car. And it's these things that, just haven't been experienced. And so I think what I'm struggling with this concept is, while when it comes to something like travel or like finding things that we're passionate about, those simpler things in life, even going into some of the aspects of play, like we talked about a few episodes ago, some of those things are trialable, but some of these goals that we have and aren't necessarily societally driven in the same way that those luxury items might be. So how would you say that, based on this, that we can really go about test driving some of those goals before we decide if we should take them on as our own?
I think that's a great point and a great question. And I guess what I would want to say is that, not that this stuff doesn't apply, but it is definitely a different scenario if we're maybe talking about somebody who's living in poverty, right? Because the idea of test driving these things means you have a certain level of luxury already in your life and a certain level of ability to try and go and do different things. So if you're living in such a life that opportunity doesn't exist to you, you're right. It's almost impossible to be able to do any of these kind of things. But there's 2 points I kind of want to make. One, because I believe the idea here is that we are trying to recreate a feeling rather than an eventual outcome. You may say, well, hey, the idea behind travel that I want to, grasp onto, what is the feeling of travel that, media or some other outside source might say? Well, it's the feeling of experiencing something new in a place you've never been before with people you don't know, right? Okay. I can somewhat imagine how that might feel. You might be a little apprehensive, but you might also be excited, So we live in Calgary. Well, we have Banff at our doorstep. And unless you've been to Banff over and over and over and over again, there's a certain level of majesty about going to the beautiful Rocky Mountains.
Sure.
If you've never gone on a hike, there's something special about going on a hike. If you've never rock climbed, if you've never done this, if you've never done that, there are ways for you to experience the grand in a small form. So I would say is that if your idea is that I feel I have a dream of travel, you don't necessarily need to go to Costa Rica. Go to Banff, right? Go on a weekend trip. Go and even just, if the idea is it's doing something new with someone you don't know, go find a group of people. There's lots of things like meetups and stuff available to you to go and experience new things with new people that you've never done before.
Do you think that the act of experiencing new is enough, or is are we trying to, you mentioned going to Banff as a taster of going on a bigger travel adventure? Is it the experience of trying to find a enough experience to know, this tastes good, I want more of this? Or do you think it's purely the practice and the routine of doing new things that can get us there?
I think it can be both, because I know people that are just in love with the concept of doing new things, right? So for them, it doesn't matter what that thing is. It's just that it's new. It's something they've never done before. And that's the thing. They'll be like, they'll get an idea in their head. They're going to go, I'm going to go skydiving. And then they will do everything they need to do to be able to go skydiving. And once they've done that, it's, okay, now I'm going to go and do this, right? But you would never know that until you tried it. And I guess the beauty of it is they could say, well, I'm going to do all these things. Okay, this week I've picked, I'm going skydiving. And they go and they go skydiving. And then they go, you know what? Skydiving is the thing. And then they will do whatever they can to just continuously go skydiving. And I know people that once they got bit by the skydiving bug, that's what they did like every month, all summer. And then all winter, all they could think about was going skydiving again. Right? So again, that's kind of the beauty of it, is that you expose yourself to just enough new until you find something that you're so zealous about that you just want to do it over and over again. And then that's what gives you the actual drive to, put in the long hours, because skydiving is expensive. Travel is expensive. Nice things are expensive. So again, if we're swinging back to this idea of, I don't find the drive on the day-to-day basis to work at my full potential, it's because you haven't found the thing that you thought was worthy enough to work for.
So, and I completely agree. And I want to take this moment to talk about a book that a colleague of mine wrote. And I seem to remember that a few episodes ago, I referenced this book, but at the time I couldn't remember the name of the book, which is awkward. Anyway, it just came to me now. The book's called Playful Intelligence. It's by a colleague named Anthony de Benedette. He's a doctor, like an MD, not a PhD, out of Michigan. And he wrote this book to really take a closer look at why adults don't play and what they can do to be more playful. And what I hear you talking about is one of the 5 components that Anthony references in his book, and it's this idea of wonder. And when we're kids, we experience the world through fresh eyes. Yeah. We experience things for the first time. So things are more likely to hit us with this sense of wonder. You talk about the first time you're seeing the mountains or going to mountains is one. A campfire, a thunderstorm, fireworks, whatever those things might be. And as we're kids, we experience these things and they create this sense of awe in us. As we grow up, we've experienced more life, we've experienced more things. Less often do we have the opportunity to experience that sense of wonder. And so what I hear you talking about is really the pursuit of doing new things that allow us to experience wonder. And some things we may experience wonder, others we may not, but either way, it really gives us that chance to see the world through different eyes and gives us an opportunity to discover what could be our next skydiving. And so I think that's really powerful. And I think that works and is a really great strategy for things like travel or things like discovering new hobbies. Hobbies are rudimentary. I don't love the word hobby, but nevertheless, you get the idea.
New skills.
New skills.
We've talked about that in the past, right? Yeah. That a skill can really light you up.
But I want to push you here, and I would only do this because, certainly you've got such expertise around supporting families to become more financially literate and then being able to advance their lives through a heightened sense of financial literacy. And not that I'm wanting you to diamond all your trade secrets, but like this idea still hits a wall for me when we start looking at, forget the luxury house. I just want to buy a house, right? Sure. I'm just making ends meet, just getting by. And so this idea that we need a taste to experience something, and again, home ownership is just the thing that I'm kind of latching on to right now. It doesn't have to be that thing, but I think that from a financial goal standpoint, and maybe this conversation isn't appropriate to talk about financial goals.
No, that's not true.
But that's where I'm getting stuck.
Sure. And I think, to be honest, it's a very apt kind of thing to think about right now, because with the way the world is and the way that, housing prices are and mortgage rates are at and all that, buying a house for a lot of people, even in our generation, is somewhat becoming, it's not becoming a reality. There's many people that will never own homes. And we're lucky here in Calgary that it's a little bit more attainable than most. But even that is starting to quickly go away. So I think it's a great example, but I think this comes down to a lot of the things that are not, a lot of the experiences that are not attainable by money, or are not attainable by the amount of money that a normal person, quote unquote, would have. So, that could be buying a house. It could be, the concept of, another good example, I would be public speaking. Somebody who dreams of being a public speaker on a massive stage, a la Tony Robbins, right? Well, you don't get that opportunity. It's not something you can test drive. So there becomes a certain level of imagination that I believe is required. And this is something that was taught to me very early in my business career, is that sometimes you have to do something that feels really silly to give yourself the opportunity to taste the experience. So if we think about the idea of home ownership, right? Probably one of the easiest examples of that would be the idea of renting out a room in a really nice hotel, right? You talked about it. What's that luxurious thing, right? Yeah. So, it's arguable that if you want to feel what it's like to live in a really nice house, go live in a really nice hotel room for a couple of nights. Or if that's not attainable to you, go to an open house of a house that you would envision being the house you want to buy. Or go to a show home for a new house that's been built. Like, I'm not exactly saying that you can go and you can live there, but if you walked in and you sat down on the couch of a show home, you introduced yourself to the sales staff and you guys, hey, I'm just here to envision. I find it unlikely that sales staff would kick you out. Don't stick around for 16 hours, but I feel it unlikely that if all you were doing is you were sitting there on the couch and, you were pretending to flick through the TV, or you were pretending to, cook dinner, and you messed and you opened the kitchen, the fridge open and closed, and you try all these different things. Does it feel silly? Yes. Would somebody maybe walk into that showroom and be like, what's this guy doing? Probably. But if you had the ability to stretch your imagination enough, it could give you that brief little taste of it. So if that's truly the dream, that's the thing that you're like, I need to taste this to drive me to go and achieve it, then you start there, right? The reason I brought up the idea of public speaking is that in my organization, we were encouraged, because we do a lot of public speaking, we were encouraged during the breaks at the conference of like 1,000 people, go and stand on the stage behind the podium and envision all of these people talking to you. Several years ago, I got the opportunity to walk the stage in Vegas at our large annual convention in front of 28,000 people. And you better believe I stopped and I looked up and I just imagined what it would be like having, an opportunity to speak to these people, right? I was only on the stage for 30 seconds. I didn't have an opportunity to talk into the mic. But you better believe the feeling of looking up and seeing all of these people, you better believe that drove me for a while. And it's probably in no small part why I do as much public speaking as I do.
I think that's amazing. And I think that what I'm now hearing, which one of the things I love about doing this podcast and doing this podcast with you is wherever we start is never where we never finish where I think we're going to finish. What I'm now hearing you say is that when we think about goals, when we think about dreams, when we think about envisioning the life that we see for ourselves in our future, it's not so much that we in fact need to test drive. And it's funny, earlier I used similar words to test drive, and you said, well, you're kind of scraping at it. And I think I understand now. I think that what you're saying is it's about having the ability to imagine and taking the time to imagine what life could be like. And instead of taking these goals or aspirations that society tells us we should hold, instead taking the time to sit down and imagine and envision the life that you could have for yourself, and looking for those opportunities where you can get a taste of that life. So if I'm hearing that right, and if that's what we're getting at, like, what's the first step? You know, if somebody's watching this and they've realized they've had this moment of like, oh yeah, I've been working really hard, maybe I'm starting to feel burnt out and I don't know what it's all for. Like, what's the first step that you would recommend to them?
Well, I think that is actually the first step, is having enough self-reflection to be able to feel like, yeah, I am burnt out and I'm frustrated, and I feel like maybe I'm not working as hard as I could be towards whatever future I've envisioned for myself. That kind of is, because a lot of people will go through life and they never really have that moment of reflection. And this is something that you and I were talking about just individually here, is that how important reflection is.
Yeah.
So that's going to be step number one. And I think step number two was something that we talked about in a previous episode that you encouraged us all to do. And that was taking out a notebook and writing down the vision of what your perfect day would be. And I did this again very recently. And it was cool to realize what the important parts of that day were, right? There were certain things that made a lot of sense to me and certain things that I was like, you know what, I could live without. And then once you realize those important things, or those things that you're like, I would want to spend my perfect day doing this, I think that helps you narrow down where you need to start exposing yourself, right? So a big example for me was, I envision that I would have at least a couple hours every day mentoring, training, or encouraging another person. That to me is very important. And you know, it's not a wholly selfless reason, because it makes me feel really good. So I was like, I want to spend some time doing this. And I was like, you know, maybe one of the reasons I feel as burnt out as I do is because I actually haven't had the opportunity to do much of that lately. So recently I reached out to a mutual friend of ours, and not that I intended for us to have any sort of this deep conversation, but it gave me an opportunity to ask him questions. And sure enough, it turned into the kind of conversation where he needed a little bit of support. He needed a little bit of somebody to talk through. And that filled my cup back up by having it. So acknowledge that you're having this struggle or this reflection point. Sit down and try and figure out, if you were to have your perfect day, what is it that you would fill that day with? And then the things in there that you like, I cannot have a day without that. Go do it. Go taste it. Go envision it. Go try and feel it. And if it does light you up the way that you thought it would, keep going. Right? Because a lot of those things, like spending, a couple hours a day to encourage and mentor someone, that is unfortunately at this point in my life not a reality to do every day. I have lots of obligations. I don't have time every day to do something like that. So it means I have to go and work harder to allow myself that freedom to then be able to go and do that on a daily basis. There's my drive. There's my go. Right?
Yeah, I think that's really, really wonderful. I think that the idea of planning that perfect day is huge, because it gives us the chance to see what we envision as a part of that day, what activities are powerful for us. But it also gives us a sense of where and who we want to be spending that time, and understanding where might help influence, do we see ourselves in an urban or rural setting? Do we see ourselves with a long commute or being able to walk to work? There's just so many things that you can illuminate when you do that activity. And yeah, I think that's a really great way to start, and a great way to make sure that your goals are your goals and your dreams are your dreams. And it's not just about trying to lean into things that you're supposed to do because society tells us that that's the time to do the thing, but rather knowing that you're doing it because it's what you want. And something else that I want to double down on that you said is it will change, it will evolve. And so don't do this once and assume that that's your life plan. Check in with it, whether that's once a month, twice a year, whatever that case is. Just make sure that you're taking the time to refresh and reevaluate your vision for your dreams, your goals, your life.
Yeah, like this video was very serendipitous when it kind of came in. I was kind of feeling kind of low, and it popped in, and you got to thank the social media algorithms, because sometimes when you need something, it just like it hits you with a whole bunch of it all at once.
Let's not give too much credit to the
algorithm. I'm giving the algorithm the credit.
You're trying to sweet talk the algorithm. I see what you're doing.
Sure, yeah.
The videos are always there. You just actually pay attention and you stop scrolling on the videos.
And then it knows to give you more.
It's the algorithm.
Yeah. Okay. So I was very happy to kind of get this video along with a lot of the other ones. And it did. I don't want to say it pulled me out of a funk, because there's nobody that can pull you out of a funk but you. But it gave me enough drive to kind of start that process. And I was really thankful for that. And I guess one last concept that I want to say before we close up here is that sometimes these moments of passion, these moments of joy, these moments of feeding your soul, they come out when you don't expect them, right? So like a great example for this, and I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, is during our Costa Rica trip. There's this moment that I remember walking up onto kind of the balcony of our hotel, and we were looking out across this bay. There's the ocean, there's boats. We're surrounded by all the people that we went on this trip with. And the sun was setting, and I remember just having this feeling of like, I want this. I want more of this. And I will do whatever it takes to get more of it. And sometimes those moments, they come and they just blindside you. And I think a lot of people will go, well, that was a really nice moment. And they kind of forget about that. But when that happens to you, don't let that go. Realize that it's the universe, the algorithm giving you what it is that you're supposed to be seeing. It's trying to show you, hey, these are the things that matter to you. These are the things you need to go chase. So, this whole episode, I think, is super fitting as our episode 21, because this podcast started with us trying to feed a feeling, right? Of being of service, of doing something that lit us up, of just trying to be a little bit better, right? And as we conclude episode 21, which, as I've shared before, is the episode that millions of podcasters never make it past, I thought this was a really fitting concept to kind of finish it off with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's this podcast is really an example of everything that we've talked about, of having the imagination to wonder what we could do to achieve a goal that we held for ourselves, and just trying to get a taste. And that taste has become 21 episodes.
It's been 21 episodes, and this will be the noisiest episode yet. Yeah, it's been a journey so far. We're both still in it to keep going here, and I'm super excited for that. And
you know what, Carlo? I'm really grateful that in spite of all of the distractions tonight, that between the puppy chasing the ball around to now the table saw outside the kitchen window, grateful that we're able to continue these conversations and get so deep into this. And And grateful to everybody for listening along. And hopefully you're getting a chuckle every time the next comedic noise pops in.
And the dog furiously playing catch with herself. Oh dear, I threw the ball in a place she can't get it. Okay. My gratitude today is going to be, you know what, we're trying to evolve this show. We're trying to evolve it into something that serves you guys more. It's something that serves us more. And that's difficult. That's a skill set neither of us really have. So the ideas that we've been bouncing off of each other and the things that we've been playing with are really exciting. And I think my gratitude is just to have a partner in you to be able to go out and kind of chase these ideas together, because I'm doing something similar on my own in one of my other businesses. And I can tell you it's so much harder by yourself. So I'm grateful to have you as a partner in this. Thank you. All right.
So with that in mind, take that time, imagine what that life could be, and don't let someone else decide what those goals and those dreams are supposed to be. Make sure that you're living the dreams and the goals that are yours.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.